All right, so this video is a follow-up into one of the topics that I had mentioned in the previous video when I was talking about evolution as well as religion. I'm going to be discussing three specific civilizations: the Greeks in the times of Troy and Spartans. Also, we'll be talking about the Sumerians, and we'll also be incorporating the Egyptians. I will also be talking about certain parts of the Bible, because when you look at information, you really can't just look at one source. You have to look at multiple sources. And the reason why I want to talk about this topic is because, ironically enough, I was watching Troy yesterday, and there was a comment made, or one of the lines in the movies, that was when Achilles killed Hector. Hector's father was asking Achilles to please let him have the body back, and in one of the comments that he made, he said, "Let me wash his body and put 2 coins on his eyes for the Birdman." And in my brain, it just triggered, you know what, the Egyptians, they actually had hieroglyphics in their walls where they showed men or beings that had bird faces. They also had ones with dog faces. So I don't single out any piece of information, nor do I exclude anything information-wise, because even in movies that were basically told to believe they're all fiction, I think there are some pieces of truth in just about every movie, whether it's told to you directly or for you to interpret, much like The Matrix. The Matrix has a lot of information in the entire movie, and people just saw it was a cool movie, but if you kind of interpret what it's telling you, it's a lot of information. So let's just go ahead and start with what I want to talk about. So I talked about, I want to address specifically giants, because I think that to this day, people just don't quite know how the pyramids were built. Yet the Egyptians, once again, they have pictures. I'm going to be showing you through this video. There's pictures of giants all throughout the place. Like this picture that I'm showing you guys right now. There's a giant sitting down with a human that's barely knee-high on him. So assuming that human is, let's say, 6 feet tall, we're talking about a giant that might be 22 feet tall. And there's other pictures. I was trying to find it because I just couldn't quite locate it. There's actually another etchings of giants actually carrying the boulders that were utilized to do and build the pyramids. In this other picture, you guys can see here, again, giants walking a giraffe, and they're about the same height. Now, if I'm not mistaken, giraffes are what, 20 feet tall, 17 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller with a neck? So you're talking about a being that's almost as tall as a giraffe. So you have these things that are being shown to you, they're right in front of you. We tend to avoid it. This other image shows a smaller being washing the feet of what seems to be a giant. Now, you're probably thinking like, Rico, but these people are probably just like etching stuff on walls. They're probably just bored. But you know, if you research these civilizations, the Greeks, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, these are civilizations that are very adamant about keeping good historical chronological records, because they wanted to leave a legacy or a history or some kind of a record of who was here, what did they accomplish, the kings of old, the heroes of old. They want some kind of information to last. So I really find it very doubtful to even consider that 100%, even 50% of this information, it's false. You know, I think that a lot of the information is on point, and even though we really can't translate 100% their writing, the hieroglyphics that they wrote, I think the images in some of these cases speak volumes. Another thing I can show you that goes back to reinforcing the giants thing is this picture of the Sumerians. Again, you have somebody that's sitting down in a chair, and these beings that are much smaller than they are. So there's plenty of in ancient civilization that talks about these beings. The Greeks in Greek mythology, which is what we call it, Greek myth, so that in your brain you take it out, it's a myth, it's not really true. Greek mythology, talk about the Greek gods, Apollo, you had Zeus, all these beings, and the statues that they built were ginormous. They are talking about centaurs. They were talking about these Pegasus, you know, horses with wings. And even now we watch them in movies and we really give it a second thought to see if that's true or false. But if we go back to what I discussed, and the image I'm going to show you here once again, and if you recall, I was talking about how we came to be. That the Sumerians had, in my opinion, advanced technological information and advanced technological advances that they could bioengineer and clone basically different species together to create something out of them. Just like I think that, again, my theory, that possibly we are a creation of a monkey with an Anunnaki being, that we got DNA from both, and that's how we came to be. That's why I guess a lot of the evolutionists say, well, you came from monkeys. I don't think it's a fallacy, but I really definitely do think that the way they think creation happened with their evolution and carbon and H2O and that kind of forming some kind of being, I think that's a bunch of crock shit because they're really reaching on that. And there's 1,000 different ways to disprove that. But they say, well, you have what's your the way that they kind of stick behind is because they ask you, well, what's your solution? Some being just created out of nowhere. Mine's a little more feasible because they're thinking logically than anything else. So in what I just mentioned as far as the bioengineering, let me tell you how that applies. In this image I'm going to show you right here, you have basically a being that looks like a cow, has wings, it has a male or human face or some kind of a being's face. So this is what I think the bioengineering kind of created. I think that they were playing around with some of these clonings, bioengineerings are coming to a new planet and they're just kind of fiddling around. No different than scientists do today where they try to clone human ears and they try to grow an ear. Now they're trying to grow an ear on the back of a mouse so they can obviously replace it for somebody and growing organs. And they're trying to clone a goat and all these different things. And we're trying to basically do test tube babies by inseminating an egg and putting a sperm inside of it and putting it inside a woman so she can have a baby. So there's a lot of things that are repeating itself that I think were already present way back in the day. Not because they developed the technology, but because I think aliens were truly involved in that. This other image I'm showing you right now about the carusel, I think is how they pronounce it, which is basically our sign of medicine, because I'm talking about bioengineering and cloning. You'll see that this was around from 4000 BC. Oh, and by the way, Sumerians were around from, and I wrote this down, sorry, from 1900 to 4000 BC. The Egyptians were around from 3100 BC to 300 BC, and the Greeks, Trojans, Spartans were from 3000 BC to 500 AD. Keep that in mind because I'm going to speculate on something in a little bit. So this sign that we utilize nowadays for medicine, they had it way back in 4,000 BC. And I think that, and you see this image right here also, which is actually, this is the actual etching that they had on the wall that we know images of, that basically shows you a very crude sketch of the same exact thing that nowadays we utilize to represent medicine. So I think all these pieces of information just kind of let you know that there's a lot more there than even we're being told. If you read the Bible, there's parts in there. You can just go to the back of the Bible and search titans or giants. I'm sure something will come up from the glossary. You can just go check those verses if you want to read it. And you don't have to get the King James Version. You can get the student version, the one that's more of layman's terms. But even the Bible, they talk about giants. So if you cross-reference, okay, the Sumerians were talking about giants. The Egyptians were talking about giants. The Greeks were talking about giants. The Bible's talking about giants. There's etchings that mention these giants. We probably want to take a look at this. Now, the image I showed you a little while ago of the flying Sumerian cow with the guy's face, I think that's kind of something we can take into account, that Pegasus, which are flying horses, it's not really that far-fetched. It really isn't. To go back again to the giant thing, here's another image of a Sumerian holding what looks to be a lion. Now, I don't know about you, but it looks like he's holding a house cat. Like me holding a regular Toby, whatever the heck those cats are called. But for them, they're holding what looks to be a lion as if it were a house cat. Now, how long is a lion? 9 to 10 feet long, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, from tail to head. So this guy is roughly, if my measurements are somewhat correct, we're talking about a 20-footer individual in this image. So that's pretty interesting. And you gotta look at that. This other image shows, and again, a Sumerian or Anunnaki, whichever one they're depicting here, with his foot on a lion. And nice on this one, the mane's a little more drawn in as far as they want you to see. So those are things that just kind of, in my mind, just kind of bounce around. I'm just like, you know what, let me just see if I remember what I read 13 years ago and put it together in a way that hopefully opens up your appetite to reading these things. Before, I also had mentioned that the Sumerians have mapped out the solar system. So I found the image that basically shows the them basically with the solar system, which is this image right here. Now, in this image, counting the sun, they're saying, I believe, is 11. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, actually it's 12. If you count the sun, it's 12 stars, including the planets. This image that I'm showing you right now is going to be a little bit easier to understand. So as you can see, that's showing you all the planets, including Nibiru, which is the 11th planet, plus the sun is the 12th. So the interesting thing about that, as I told you guys before, is that in the Sumerian tablets, when it talks about the planets, the Anunnakis were actually counting the planets from the outside in, not from the inside out, which leads you to believe that the only way that you count that way is if you're coming from the outside to the inside. And then the last thing I want to mention is the speculation that I mentioned, because I mentioned the ages or the times when these civilizations were around. This image I'm showing you right now is of the orbits, speculative orbits of Nibiru, which is 3,600 years. Now, if you can go back to the ages I told you, so I mentioned that the Sumerians were around from 4000 BC to 1900 BC, the Egyptians were around from 3100 BC to 300 BC, and the Greeks were around, again, the Spartans and Troyans, from 3000 BC to 500 AD. So there's a lot of crossover between the civilizations where they would have been able to see the exact same thing. It wasn't just isolated to one civilization, which is why I think a lot of the things that we find between the Egyptians, Sumerians, and some of the Greek mythology, quote unquote again, Greek mythology, it basically confirms each other. So here's my speculation. And again, you can say that I'm reaching. World-ending events occur, in my opinion, because this planet that has a 3,600 year orbit gets too close to our planet. And if I recall correctly, Nibiru is actually a moon of a much larger planet that's called a dwarf planet. It's a planet that tried to become a star, a sun. It failed, but it has a moon, and that moon is supposed to be Nibiru, where these beings are called Anunnaki supposedly resided. So my belief is that every 3,600 years we have a world-ending event. So here's what I'm going to speculate. I would venture out to say that obviously the Sumerians were the first to write about the Anunnakis, and they were around in 4000 BC. So let's say that that's the first visit. Now, if you read the Sumerian tablets also, they talk about that the planet wasn't really close to Earth just quite yet, and that X amount of time did pass before the actual beings returned back to their planet. So let's just speculate and say that around 4000 BC is when the first visit of the Sumerians happened. Now, I don't know, and I was trying to find, but I don't think anybody even knows when the Great Flood happened. But that's what I would say possibly was one of the world-ending events. Now, I don't know if the Great Flood was caused based on what the Bible states, which is just basically rain for 40 days and 40 nights, or if it was a world-ending event. But I will gander to speculate this. If this planet has a 3,600 year orbit, and it was here around 4000 BC, that means that it probably showed up again around the time when the Greeks were just falling out or coming out of their era in the 500 AD. So let's say they showed up a couple hundred years BC, maybe 500 or so BC, 400 BC. And they should technically be showing up again around 3000 AD then, if that was their second visit. So this thing of, God is coming, prepare yourself, whatever's been harping on for the better part of half a century, at least since I've been alive. I can remember my mother and everybody else saying God is coming. It's been 40 years, but obviously 40 years for us, which is a one rotation of our planet, is nothing. When you talk about the one rotation of one planet, is 3,600. So you can kind of get 1 to 3,600 ratio. So just want to leave you guys with those thoughts, to just kind of leave you guys to ponder. Hopefully that gives you some appetite to go out and search. I'm going to give you another piece of information for you to go out and utilize if you're interested in this topic. I think you guys remember George. And George was the one that recommended I watch a movie called Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist. Sorry, I had to kind of go over that head. So Zeitgeist. If you guys watch that documentary, it's very, very, very interesting. I think that's one of the things that sparked initially my research, because it touched on religion, it touched on 9/11, it touched on a lot of different things, and that's really what started sparking my interest in just searching everything that I searched. So highly recommend that if you're curious about what they tell you are conspiracy theories, then by all means, definitely watch the Zeitgeist movie, read the Sumerian tablets, and trust me, your brain, if you're kind of like me, will just kick into overdrive, and the things you have questions about that you don't have answers, or that I just touched on that movie, you're going to want to research, and that's going to lead you into a whole slew of different topics. I will warn you, however, don't get too deep in it, because there's a truth about the red pill and the blue pill. And there is a truth about getting too deep in the rabbit hole, because you're right now, we are in the blue pill stage. We're civilization. We basically depend on everything: electricity, hot water, clothing, education, food, because you don't have to hunt for anything. The red pill is, okay, let me kind of take away, or step away from civilization altogether, and let me understand how civilization really works and what information is being withheld from me. And I'm telling you to be cautious how deep you go down the rabbit hole, which is how deep you search this information. Because if you're anything like me, at the end, you're going to really understand how much of a slave you are, and how much of like stupidity people are that, which are people just like kind of like nowadays, they're just looking at a cell phone. It's kind of that same feeling. And if you're like me, you're going to want something about it, but you're going to realize that you can't do anything about it. Because I'm getting a little off topic here. I'm getting a little longer breath than I wanted to. But think of it this way. You're not meant to understand this. That's why there's polar opposites on everything. People that wear glasses, people that don't, people that are white, people that are black, people that are Democratic, people that are Republican, people that are tall, people that are short, males, females, straight, gay. Even sports, they have opposing teams at all times. What I'm getting at is this. You are distracted at every possible turn with television programming, which is telling you right there in the actual subject. It's television programming. We're going with your program. Yeah, you're programming your brain. They're feeding bullshit into your head. And it's meant to be just like a magic trick. It keeps you entertained doing something, while the powers to be, do whatever the heck they want. They disseminate enough information for you to not be curious and want to look behind the curtain like the Wizard of Oz. And you're basically a manageable society. You are sheep. You're being led, like I mentioned before. It is those people that are woke, that search information, understand it. They're saying, you know what, I'm tired of the bullshit. I'm tired of just not being told the truth. There's things that don't make sense because I think about it every day. I'm looking at it. Just like people say there's no racism, but yet every day, black people get shot for not having any weapons, acting just somewhat retaliatory. And you have white people that act like nutcases. They actually have handguns and they don't get shot. So there's a lot of things that if you just take a closer look, it's right in front of you. And you realize that as it applies to the civilization I just talked about, it applies to almost every aspect of your life. So hopefully that gives you guys something to go out and search and basically educate yourself on. The last thing I want to leave you with is I always try to give you guys some information that's going to be relevant. I hope this was relevant to some of you guys. I want to recommend you guys read a book. It has nothing to do with this, but it's extremely, extremely helpful for you to develop your financial intelligence. So this book has been around for about 20 years. You can buy it online for probably like $5 or $6. I don't get any compensation. I'm just recommending it to you. It's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The synopsis of this basically is a gentleman that grew up in Hawaii that had his father, obviously, that was an employee. So he went to school, went to college, got PhDs, and got a job. He got a professional career. He just worked in the system, working himself up the ladder. So he's got a certain way of thinking. And they had a really close friend of his that had a father that was the complete opposite. This guy dropped out of school. He started his own business. And he thought just completely differently than his at-home father. Now, his father struggled his whole life, even though he had a PhD. His friend's father was extremely wealthy. So he was able to get the perspective of both men. A man that chose the career to study, go to school, and everything else. And a man that said, the heck with school. I don't need it. I can make my own money. And then how he did it. So I will be talking more about that topic because I think that's another important topic to talk about next video. But with this video, I'm wrapping it up. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.